And they had a unique situation where they're not growing out there. So the plan, this 100-house subdivision, they didn't have any of those. They didn't have to plan. And so they just did some energy efficiency and tried to get more out of what they had, or maybe not have to replace things that are wearing out as far as the supply side. So they were looking at some energy efficiencies, but they didn't have any grand plans, and that makes it unique, because you've got a situation where you have, I think like 1% growth going forward, so you do have a growth, so you do have you've got these new houses coming on board of some sort of customers, so you have a situation where you can say, here's an energy need out there coming, we want to supply that energy need to efficiencies so they can get what they need but not use so much energy, or should we supply it through our traditional power supplies? And that's just sort of the background on that. So you got to look at some of the new technologies on the supply, on the energy saving side, and then that measuring, how you measure it and put them on a level playing field. How you measure that can be if you want to throw in the externalities, that can be kind of difficult.
Did these cities have any goals that?
Well, I was thinking about how do you figure out the goals and objectives. I always have trouble with goals and objectives. What's the difference and all that? But I kind of figured out a way that helped me understand it by working backwards. So I figure out some sort of energy saving device, like you could put these blankets around water heaters to save. So that would be the end result of I'm going the other way. So I say, here's the end result: putting these wrappers around these water heaters. So what does that do? Well, it saves some energy, so you don't have to buy so much energy, and that maybe the usage per customer go down. So there's your objective. So I work backwards, and then you might have something called load control devices that during the peak time of the day you can kind of cycle different customers on and off, so the peak goes down. So you look at that program, you work backwards. Well, what does that do? It lowers our peak. It means we have to plan for less purchase power capacity. So that was our objectives. So the way I work on this kind of, like I say, it's confusing for me. So I found it helpful to work backwards. Take the little projects and then say, well, what more were we trying to do? And then by working backwards, you say, let's use that. Because then once you've got that objective, we want to reduce, like on these load cycling, we want to reduce the peak. That was our objective. Now we've got the objective, we can find different ways to do it. We can do this load cycling, or maybe we can have an interruptible rate on customers. We can interrupt them during peak time, because now you've set your objectives on that.
I provided you in your packet a little memorandum, and on there was a objectives, the nature of objectives, if you had a chance to review that. But basically, I provided you some what I thought would be objectives that you might want to have us develop programs to meet. Reliable electric service, that's a pretty standard objective. You want to do that. How do we do that? Well, we got to have a distribution system, and we have to have an interconnection system that allows us to have a good, good reliable electric. Minimal disruptions. I think that's one of your objectives anyway. You guys have always looked at interruptions as a standard that you analyze. You monitor that on a constant basis. So I think that it would be a natural objective. Again, minimizing environmental impacts, that'll be part of the supply side, and we will discuss that when we get to the supply side issues. Diversified supply, those are things that there's both fuel diversification and there's resource diversification. One of the things we're going to discuss in the next agenda item would be possibility of getting wind generation as a component of the overall supply. So that would be a diversification issue. Obviously, minimizing costs has always been a goal of not only you guys, but I think in general for everybody. Provide local employment. as it says, resource choices have different effects upon local employment. Now, I guess the best example is if you built a power plant out here, you'd have to staff up to run it. Okay, so that would impact, if your your rates are low enough, that can generate employment by people moving in and using your system because it's got lower costs. Retain flexibility. You always want to retain flexibility in anything you're doing because you never know what the future will hold. Obviously, right now, everyone understands that coal is kind of out of favor, and so 3 years from now, that may not be true. A new administration comes in and basically turns upside down everything that's been done over the last 8 years. That can happen, and so you have to be flexible enough to respond to those types of things. So I guess what I'd like to do is just kind of have a general discussion about what, I know it's been kind of thrown at you real quickly. Hopefully you had a chance to read some of the material before the meeting, but what kind of objectives or goals that you've heard of in the past or you might think would be appropriate for the city to try to pursue as they go forward over the next 5 years. And I guess one of two things we can discuss it tonight, or you can send it to Dave email-wise, and if you have a comment, think about it later when you get home at 2 o'clock in the morning, you think, oh yeah, I should have said something about that. You can just send it to Dave and he'll get it to us. But if you have some general comments or questions, I should like to answer them right now.
I have lots of comments. Well, first off, your presentation is very comprehensive in itself, and that initially had concerns, but your presentation with you and Tony covered a lot of my questions, but so now my questions become comments. I think the idea of having an abbreviated IRP at this point in time, I think we need to keep it, you can call it low-hanging fruit, meet the minimum requirements, you got a time factor, we don't have this budgeted. I think we don't want to, all this is nice, but we need to keep this one first simple.
I realize that.
And I know that Tony, you're working with little cities, don't make this more sophisticated as we can. We can do that, we can add to that in the annual updates as we go forward.
You sure can.
And so that's my take on it. Meet the minimum.
That's my focus too.
Okay.
Would there be any benefit to us trying to become a agenda item in one of the August city council work sessions after the budget's passed, so mid-August, before we get to that September 2nd? Because, one, I can see there being lots of comments on this. And two, whatever input we've given you on programs, then are gonna have a cost. And you're gonna get some estimates in and so on and so forth. And they're gonna come in after they finish the budget.
That's right.
Right. So, we're not gonna get a lot of feedback before then that we can say, hey, council, here's what we recommend for next year or the next 5 or whatever.
Well, I'm assuming that I would not implement anything in 2015 budget. It'll start in the 2016 budget cycle. Okay, if that helps you a little bit.
That does.
Yep.
Let's keep it simple.
Yeah.
It's too late to do, like I said, the budget's already set for 2015, and we can't go back and there might be some minor things like getting information together,
Right.
energy saving information in this first year of the program. Maybe even do, the energy audits might be, voluntary energy audit issues might be put into the program, but those would probably be the first phase, and then if there's any funding requirements, that wouldn't start till 2016.
So of the objectives that you provided us on here, do you have ready-made, what's the next step down from an objective?
What would be programs that
Do you have
design-
programs
that meet those objectives?
in mind that would meet those objectives, or?
Well, I tried to discuss a little bit, like saving energy, cost saving energy, obviously would be, energy audits would save energy.